The truth behind the family scandal no one talks about. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. My father, the same man who sneered at EMTs like me, gripped my sleeve and whispered, "Please save me." He said it in the marble foyer of the house that never felt like mine, beneath a chandelier and his billboard portrait. I stood in my uniform after a 12-hour shift, eyes grainy, still smelling of bleach and diesel. I'm Evan, 30, the guy who shows up when strangers stop breathing at 3 a.m., who learns last words and then drives back to a silent apartment. My paycheck is steady, my hands are steady, and my father spent years calling that small. He didn't say what needed saving, his heart, his image, or his money. His fingers trembled once, then he buried it under practiced charisma. "A private matter," he murmured, voice pitched for cameras that weren't there. He'd called because he thinks I fix things, bleeding, storms, other people. But I knew the scent in his hallway wasn't antiseptic. It was fear disguised as cologne. "Walk with me," he said, leading me past a row of auction-grade landscapes into his office. The room was an argument in walnut, sharp edges, heavy doors, a safe clicking behind the painting. I'd been in enough homes to recognize staged calm. On his desk, a silver letter opener, 3 phones, and glossy programs naming him chair, patron, savior. "You're good under pressure," he tried again. "You see through chaos." Translation: he wanted triage without a bill, obedience without questions. I thought about lives I'd cradled on cracked sidewalks and the rules that hold a person together. Tell the truth, breathe, keep the blood where it belongs. "What is this?" I asked. He closed the doors and exhaled. "I need a bailout," he said, choosing the word like an imported suit. "Short-term cash flow. Optics." He said it as if reputation were a vital organ and mine a spare he could transplant. If I stepped in, I would be complicit. If I refused, I would be proof he raised a disappointment. Either way, I felt the story tighten around my throat like a seatbelt. I didn't know how public the crash would be or how far debris would fly. I said I wouldn't move without details, and he smiled like we'd started a negotiation I'd already lost. Then he tipped the painting aside, and the safe began to sing. People think contempt is loud. With Richard, it was posture and paper. When I was 8, he lined our report cards like evidence, tapping a Mont Blanc beside each A. By 16, he'd call from the home gym. Real men scale companies, not stairwells, when I came in sweaty from the clinic. He wore compliments like cufflinks for other people's sons, the debaters, the founders, the boy with the yacht app. My choice to ride an ambulance sounded to him like refusal. Mom left when I was 19, not for another man, but for oxygen and sleep. "Your father loves the mirror more than the room," she told Aunt May, who moved closer after the divorce. Aunt May kept receipts no accountant would recognize, who showed up, who remembered allergies, who drove me to the EMT exam when my car died. Richard sent a driver, who got lost. I learned the brittle chemistry of his love, praise when public, frost when private. A month before the foyer whisper, he delivered a fresh put-down at a brunch fundraiser. A venture capitalist asked what I did. Richard said, "He drives fast and lifts heavy things, like I was gym equipment he might upgrade." People laughed because laughter was the price of pastries. Later, Lena squeezed my hand and whispered, "He didn't mean it like that," but her eyes did a small flinch like they always do when the check arrives. I kept telling myself I didn't need his blessing to do my job. Only, contempt corrodes even if you don't drink it. I measured silence like medics count minutes without oxygen. By the time he said "save me," I had rehearsed ignoring him. But contempt was only the wrapping around something I hadn't unboxed. That something had a date stamp, a dollar sign, and a very sharp edge. The last clean pride I remember was a winter call. A woman blue-lipped in a locked sedan, heater dead, baby sleeping behind her. I smashed the glass, warmed the infant against my chest, and listened to the mother sob into the oxygen mask, grateful and alive. I never told Richard. He would have said it wasn't scalable. Aunt May said to keep a list anyway, a quiet ledger nobody could audit. I started that notebook the week his face landed on a magazine for visionary debt restructuring. Even then, I didn't think his hunger could become a trap wide enough to swallow us. The first red flag didn't wave, it tripped me. A receptionist from a private bank called my cell by mistake, asking to confirm Mr. Lake's signature for the bridge facility. She sounded bored until I said I wasn't his assistant. 2 days later, a certified envelope jammed into the gate. Notice of federal tax lien, embossed like a bruise. Richard still strode through rooms like a conductor, sending chefs away for oversalting and laughing loudly into calls. I told myself it was clerical, that rich people collect notices like hospitals collect broken pens. Then a housekeeper whispered that 3 drivers had been let go for optics. I tried ignoring it. At work that week, we worked a 5-car pileup under the expressway. Cargo spilled like confetti, one man pinned by the steering column. In the hiss of flares and diesel, I felt something I never feel near my father. Clarity. Vitals, sequence, pressure, lift. After handoff to the trauma team, I stood by the ambulance and reassured a witness who kept apologizing for praying. I told her praying and breathing never hurt outcomes. Clarity felt like concrete. Doubt felt like the mansion's silk rugs. That night, a florist delivered arrangements as tall as children with a handwritten card. Thank you for your continued partnership. The card named a lender I'd never heard him mention. I Googled the bank in my apartment, the screen throwing ghost light across the sink of bowls. The lender specialized in opportunistic credit and special situations, phrases that cover a lot of unlit ground. I scrolled until a press release announced a confidential facility with an unnamed hospitality group in our city. Richard's last acquisition was a boutique hotel with a lobby waterfall and a habit of losing money. I could have called him then. Instead, I called Aunt May. She listened, then said, "If a man wears a parachute to breakfast, ask where he plans to jump." I laughed, then remembered the lien, the missing drivers, the foyer whisper. "Don't go alone," she added. "And take notes like you expect to read them in court." I promised I would, even as part of me insisted it was all smoke. A minute later, my phone buzzed with an unknown number that made my skin go cold. I didn't recognize the number, but the voice was sugar over gravel. "Mr. Lake? This is Dell from Cortland and Pierce," she said, naming the same lender from the florist card. "We're confirming receipt of the amended guarantee." I stared at the cracked paint near my apartment window and said, "You have the wrong Evan." She paused. "We have the correct Richard." The line clicked dead before I could ask anything else. That night, Lena dragged me to a charity panel at the hotel with the waterfall. Richard took the stage and unspooled phrases like resilience, vision, and liquidity improvements. During audience questions, a reporter asked about rumors of liens. Richard laughed. "People confuse real estate strategy with personal distress," he said, tilting his head at me as if to include me in the punchline. After, he wrapped an arm around my shoulders too tightly. "Tell your ambulance buddies to watch their pensions." He smirked, breath warm with single malt. "Public funds get raided first when men who can't count get promoted." I jerked free. "Say that into a microphone," I said. He stared through me. Driving home, I saw a sedan idling outside his gate, hazard lights blinking like Morse code. A man in a windbreaker stepped out as I passed. "Process server," he told the intercom camera, voice flat. I knew that tone. I'd heard it delivering death notifications. At 1:07 a.m., my apartment buzzer rasped. No visitors. Then a manila envelope slid under my door, heavy with paper. I opened it and found a summons addressed to Richard E. Lake and Affiliates, plus an attached note. "Please ensure MR. Lake receives. Staff will not accept." The handwriting leaned right, impatient. I called Richard and got voicemail. I called Lena. She answered with a whisper. "He's fine. He's asleep," she said, which meant she was lying. "You're enabling a fire," I said. "We're putting it out with PR," she answered, brittle as glass. On shift the next day, a teenager handed me his skateboard to splint his friend's arm and asked if my dad really owned the Waterfall Hotel. "He owns the story about owning it," I said, and he laughed without understanding. When I finally cornered Richard at his office, he signed a check for a fundraiser, asked me to hand it to the intern, and hissed, "You will not embarrass me over paperwork." I set the summons on his desk, and the skin around his mouth went paper white before he smiled again. "Optics," he whispered, but there was panic in the seam of the word. "I warned you," I said, "that your mirror would crack from the inside." And then the office door opened to reveal a woman I'd never seen holding a baby who looked exactly like my sister. I froze because the baby's eyes were unmistakably ours, and the woman spoke my father's name. Aunt May has this way of closing a door on noise without moving an inch. She brewed tea in my apartment like a field surgeon, quiet and methodical, while I tried to explain a woman with my father's last name on her lips and a baby with our family's eyes in her arms. Affairs are expensive, Aunt May said, but secrets make compounding interest. She handed me a notepad. Write what you saw, not what you fear. I wrote, Waterfall Hotel, Cortland and Pierce. Lien. Summons. Unknown woman. Baby, Monday 9:14 a.m. Lobby scent of lemon cleaner. Security guard Oliver looking away twice. It calmed me to inventory, to stack moments where they wouldn't topple. It's how I survive chaotic scenes. Reduce the roar into ordered boxes. Place one breath inside each. Lena called from the mansion, voice tuned to diplomacy. That woman is a vendor, she said, and I could hear her swallowing panic like buttons. Dad helps people, she added, which wasn't a lie so much as a sedative. Aunt May took the phone. He helps himself first, she said, and he's about to need more than a Band-Aid. Lena apologized for tone and hung up to manage optics. I promised Aunt May I would keep working my shifts, that I wouldn't let Richard's storm drown my patience. Still, I caught myself checking the rear view for sedans and saving every voicemail twice. At the station, I asked our captain how long you keep an incident report. Forever, if you're smart, he said, tapping the red binder with a fingernail. That night, I found a burner phone in the glove compartment of Richard's spare SUV, which I'd borrowed after mine coughed into silence. It was a cheap model, settings in Spanish, no contacts saved, until a text pinged in, need the cash today. Same cage, same limits. I screenshotted, emailed it to myself, and slid the phone back exactly where I'd found it, screen down beneath the insurance card. Then I drove to the mansion and watched my father through the front window, rehearsing a speech with perfect hands and a mouth that had forgotten how to tell the truth to his own family. Then his rehearsal stopped, and someone whispered, "She's back," behind him. I didn't announce the burner. I baited it. I replied, confirm time and location. 10 minutes later, 14th and Vargas, 7 p.m., green door. Cashier knows. Richard texted me from his main number at 6:02 p.m. Family dinner tonight, 7:30. Be on time, and please, clean shirt. I wore the uniform on purpose. The diner on Vargas felt like a place that collects untraceable favors. Cracked formica, a calendar 3 months behind, a green door with a crooked handle. I ordered coffee in a chipped mug and watched a man in a navy cap exchange a padded envelope with a woman whose fingernails were bitten to the quick. On the burner at 7:05, the cashier typed, "Late fee if not here by 10 after." I took a picture of the sign behind the register that said cash only and the corner camera with its blinking red light. I walked outside and called the number on the florist card, asked for Delaware. "You shouldn't be at Vargas," she said without hello. The click in her voice suggested a smile that didn't reach teeth. "I'm confirming whether my father is in default," I said. "He is in performance," she replied. "And you are in obstruction." She hung up. At 7:11 a.m. man brushed my shoulder and murmured, "Green back room." Like he'd been told to say it, like I'd been expected. In the green back room stood a woman in a blazer with a faint stain. "You Evan?" she asked. "You look like him around the eyes." She slid a ledger across the table. "Cash advances," she said. "He promised to clear them after the fundraiser." "It's after." The numbers weren't elegant. They were arithmetic done with fear. $20,000 here, $40,000 there. Dates spaced like hiccups. Under cage, someone had scrawled Marina Casino, private, and next to it a list of initials with arrows. I photographed every page while the woman watched me like a cat watches a wire. She looked relieved that I wasn't denying anything. "He's not the first man to drown with a pocket square," she said. "But he might be the first to pretend he's rain." I thanked her and left with my veins drumming like parade snares. I turned toward the mansion, already hearing the knives under smiles. I visited a branch of the private bank the next morning carrying a box of donuts and politeness. "I'm here for public records," I told the receptionist, which was true if you stretched public until it squeaked. She directed me to a kiosk where a man named Greg supervised screen sharing. I asked about UCC filings, liens, and corporate entities connected to Lake Hospitality Holdings, LLC. "You a journalist?" he asked. "I'm a medic," I said, who hates surprises, he typed. We found Lake Hospitality tied to a shell named Sailwind Partners, which was tied to a trust that had my grandmother's maiden name misspelled. Wrong letter, right intent. Donuts became favor. Greg printed a list of financing statements and release notices. Dates: March 3rd, April 19th, June 2nd. Amounts: $1. 2M, $600,000, $350,000. Collateral: receivables, fixtures, rents. I photographed, circled mismatched addresses, and felt the room tilt. Outside, I call my mother. "He put the cabins in my name," she said, voice as thin as the lake air where she lives now. "Check if he used them as guarantees." I checked. He had. Aunt May drove me to interview Richard's former assistant, Kira, who now sold real estate. She described Saturdays he called from golf demanding wires to the usual, and calendar entries swapped for emojis after audit requests. "When did you quit?" I asked. "When he asked me to notarize a signature I didn't see," she said. She handed me a thumb drive like a confession. "He'll say I stole it," she warned. On it were emails with subject lines like "for optics only" and "temporary guarantee for family." The timestamps thundered. One overlapped with the night he mocked me at the fundraiser. Every story he told required a matching silence from someone else. I had been his favorite silence, but that was over now. I booked an appointment with lawyer Carter, who answered questions with long pauses and wore a slate tie. He said words like fraudulent conveyance and piercing the veil, then translated them into, "If he used your mother's assets without consent, a judge will notice." Carter asked for evidence that connects the burner to Richard, and I remembered the insurance card I'd slid it under. Carter nodded once and said, "Bring the burner, and don't flinch. Mini twist or not, the shape of the monster mattered more than its name." Carter examined Kira's thumb drive with tweezers in his mind. We found a folder labeled Sailwind, Advisory Only, which contained bios for men who didn't exist and signatures that traveled across documents like sticker decals. One PDF was a standby letter of credit with a stamped bank logo. Carter's cursor hovered and revealed a hidden layer. The seal had been pasted from a press kit. "It's not a forgery in the cinematic sense," he said. "It's a promise made of paper bones." He asked me to list stakes, not feelings. I wrote, Mom's lakeside cabins pledged without consent. Lena's condo held through a trust that funneled rent to Sailwind management fees. 2 hotels cross-collateralized. Casino cash advances pretending to be vendor payments. The woman with the baby? Listed as a consultant. Monthly stipends, no deliverables, a mailbox address beside a pawn shop. "What is he hiding?" Carter asked. "Not why, what?" I answered. "Liquidity holes disguised as growth, debt dressed like philanthropy, personal losses washed through family initiatives." Carter nodded. "And the why?" I stared at the ceiling where the tiles formed cheap constellations. "Pride," I said finally, but knew I was guessing, like diagnosing a patient through a locked door. Aunt May texted a photo of Mom's deed with a note. "Check county records." I drove there wearing my radio and asked the clerk to search for transfers. We found a quitclaim recorded at 4:17 p.m. on a Tuesday last spring, filed by a family manager I'd never met. The notary's name matched one of Kira's emoji calendar days. I called Lena from the parking lot and told her the cabins were at risk and her condo's rent wasn't reaching her mortgage. She inhaled a thin ribbon of air. "He promised me it's temporary," she said. "He promised me I'm safe." I pictured the baby's eyes in the lobby and the ledger's jittery numbers. Safe is a word that does math, and ours didn't add up anymore. I drove to the Waterfall Hotel to ask questions nobody would welcome and walked into a lobby that smelled like lemon cleaner and exits. On the mezzanine, a banner fluttered for a Community Impact Awards night, and beneath it stood the woman with the baby, smiling like a person who knew which chandelier wire was frayed. Sarah met my eyes and said, "Ask him whose child I carry. Plans feel braver than they are when you name them. We gather proof, then we choose," I told Aunt May that night, laying out the burner, the ledger photos, the UCC filings, and a printed email where Richard typed "temporary guarantee for family" at 1:12 a.m. Carter suggested 3 lanes: criminal exposure, forgeries, misappropriation, civil leverage, injunctions, rescission, and private negotiation, conditions in writing. He said we needed a single undeniable bridge from Richard to the burner. I remembered the insurance card under which I'd hidden it. The policy number matched a corporate fleet account billed to Lake Hospitality. We recorded a fresh call using Carter's consent settings. I dialed Dell at Cortland and Pierce on speaker while Carter listened. "The cage wants 20 by Friday," she said, strained now. "Remind your father he chose the cap." Carter scribbled a time, and I added the words cage CAP, Friday, 20K to my incident-style notes. I drove to the Marina Casino. A security guard remembered Richard's watch. "He taps it when he's losing," he said. He pointed at a placard, "All transactions recorded for security and compliance." Carter smiled when I told him. "Subpoena bait," he said. "But we can do something more elegant first." We set up a recorded call from the burner to Richard's main phone. I kept my voice flat. "Same cage, same limits," I said. Silence. Then, "Stop texting this number. Use the green door." His voice. "The bridge." "Now we choose," Aunt May said, hands around her mug like prayer. "Help him with conditions, or reveal him to save the rest." I stared at my uniform hanging over the chair, still creased from last shift. At work, choosing wrong costs minutes. At home, it costs the next decade. I wrote 2 columns. Help first. Demand he refinance, sell the hotel, repay advances, publicly apologize to Mom and Lena, sign a consent order with Carter, or confront first, file an injunction on the cabins, warn the bank, invite Lena to witness. My pen hovered as the old reflex, to rescue, fought the new one, to refuse unsafe scenes. Aunt May tapped the second column. "Sometimes the only oxygen mask is the truth," she said, "and you'll have to put it on him while he fights you." Outside, my phone vibrated. Dad moved money, and Friday accelerated toward us. Family dinner at the mansion was staged like a campaign ad. Candles, linen, a roast that looked expensive to undo. Richard stood when I entered, looked at the uniform, and tried to turn it into a laugh. "Couldn't put on a collar?" he said. "Wear a tie and I'll wear the truth," I answered. Lena shot me a look that said she had run out of hands to hold the peace. Aunt May sat straight-backed with the calm of someone who has seen storms name themselves. The woman from the lobby wasn't present, but her perfume might have been, or maybe I was smelling the lemon cleaner of crisis again. During salad, Richard turned to me with a stage whisper. "You embarrassed me at the bank," he said, likely meaning that Greg told someone a medic asked informed questions. "You embarrass me every time you choose sirens over strategy," he added louder. "What do you even own, Evan?" "A bet on wheels." Lena murmured, "Dad." But he warmed to the room like applause was due. I set my phone face down, recording. Aunt May asked about Mom's cabins, and Richard called them assets in motion. Lena bit her lip so hard a tiny dot of blood appeared. I asked about Sailwind, and he called it advisory. I asked about the casino cage, and his fork clinked as he put it down. "People in my position smooth rough edges for the greater good," he said evenly. "If you understood scale, you'd admire it." I told him I admired not stealing people's houses. His hand closed into a fist mindfully, like a trainer had coached that anger should build corridors, not explosions. "Watch your words, son," he said. "This family eats because I hunt." Aunt May's eyes flashed. "This family eats because women cook what men bring or fail to bring." The room cooled. Richard leaned forward, softened his voice, and tried a new weapon. "You're tired," he told me. "You do hard work. Let me carry the heavy things. Sign this NDA so I can brief you fully without fear." He slid a folder across the table, as if moving a chess piece invisible to me. Lena squeezed my arm under the table like a metronome set to panic. I opened the folder and found a document with my name spelled perfectly and every trap I had ever avoided in 12 neat paragraphs. I looked up and said, "Whose initials are on Sailwind's checks?" We didn't sleep that night. Carter marked the NDA like a homicide board. Unenforceable clauses, lopsided remedies, a confidentiality carve-out narrower than a paper cut. "He wants you bound while he moves assets," Carter said. "If you sign, you become furniture." We executed Plan B, the trap. I called Dell and said we needed to stabilize performance with a friendly banker who could reassure family stakeholders. She proposed a meeting at the hotel's private conference room. Glass, projector, view of the lobby's waterfall like tamed rain. We invited Lena, framing it as clarity. Aunt May baked muffins as if one might defuse a bomb. Carter subpoena drafted in case anyone decided to forget things later. I texted Richard, meeting with lender Thursday at 10. We should align. He replied instantly. Excellent. Optics matter. I could see his posture through the text. I also texted the woman from the lobby, whose number I pried from a catering invoice. We need to verify your consulting agreement. She replied, I'll be there if he is. Her name, I learned, was Sarah. The baby's name, I did not ask. Some truths arrived too loud. I printed the ledger photos, the UCC filings, the casino placard shot, the email headers from Kira's drive, and the county deed transfer. Carter loaded them into a slick deck with bullet points like arteries, carrying consequences where they needed to go. The morning of the meeting, my hands shook for the first time in months, not from fear of confrontation, but from the muscle memory of delivering bad news. I packed gum to keep my jaw from clenching and a copy of Mom's deed in a transparent sleeve. The elevator hummed like a throat clearing. In the glass room, Dell arrived in a navy dress, composed, carrying a tablet. Richard swept in 10 minutes late, smiling with his whole face. Lena 2 steps behind, face pale. Sarah slid in last, holding a folder and the kind of composure that looks borrowed from a stronger friend. We took seats. Carter clicked the projector awake. Dell said, let's proceed. Richard said, let's align. I said, let's document. And then the waterfall grew very loud in the sudden silence. Then Dell murmured, record, and Carter nodded like a surgeon before incision. Carter started with dates like a medic starts with vitals. March 3rd, $1, 2M secured by receivables. April 19th, $600,000 secured by fixtures. June 2nd, $350,000 secured by rents. County records show an unconsented quitclaim on cabins held by Ms. Lake, recorded at 4:17 p.m. with Notary Martinez, who also appears on internal calendars. He clicked, and Kira's emails appeared. Temporary guarantee for family. For optics only. Timestamps overlapping a fundraiser where Richard mocked my work. He clicked again. The casino placard, then the ledger pages with Marina Casino, private scrawled in jittery ink. We also have an audio file, Carter said, and my voice from the burner played. Same cage, same limits. Then Richards, stop texting this number. Use the green door. Mr. Lake, Dell said carefully. Do you dispute that these obligations exist and are current? Richard's smile calcified. I dispute your characterization, he said. These are standard liquidity tools for growth-oriented entities. Carter translated. He's gambling and backfilling with family assets. Sarah slid her folder forward. Inside were printouts of monthly consulting payments with no deliverables, all signed by Richard with an initialed note. Keep off payroll. Optics. Lena exhaled a breath that sounded like the first one after surfacing. Richard pivoted hard. This is a private family matter, he said, voice lowering. Evan stole records. Kira conspired. Dell, you are out of line. Dell's tone didn't change. Our covenants require disclosure of adverse material events, she said. Your defaults are technical now. They will be actual by Friday. Richard's mask slipped. You wanted to be a hero? He hissed at me. Congratulations. You killed your father's legacy. I heard my own voice come out steady. I'm trying to keep Mom housed and Lena solvent. He turned to Lena. He's jealous, he said softer. He couldn't build, so he breaks. Lena's hands shook. Did you put my condo rent into Sailwind? She asked. He didn't answer. Sarah quietly said, Richard, and he flinched as if the name itself hurt. Egos sometimes bleed loud. His bled quiet. In the way he looked down and then left, calculating exits. Choose carefully, Evan, he said finally. Families don't forgive public hangings. Richard stood slowly and whispered, end this now, like a prayer mispronounced. Fallout doesn't arrive like a single wave. It comes like a month of rain. Dell issued a notice of default and a standstill agreement with conditions that read like a moral inventory. Cease casino transactions, unwind Sailwind, restore diverted rents, release Mom's cabins, submit to third-party monitoring. Carter filed a petition to void the quitclaim and sent a courtesy copy to Richard's counsel, which is a polite way of lighting a match in a dry field. The hotel cut staff hours. The waterfall ran shorter. Lena moved into Aunt May's guest room and started meeting with a credit counselor who spoke spreadsheet like scripture. Sarah's payments stopped, She sent me a text that read, "I'm telling the truth because he won't," and I saved it in the folder where I keep voices that cost something to use. At work, the chief reminded me to keep my head where my boots are. I messed up a minor inventory count, the kind of mistake you fix with a pin and a shrug, and felt shame all the way to my elbows. "You can't compress a family collapse into your off hours," my partner said gently. "You'll get crushed by the leftovers." Richard called twice from a new number, leaving voicemails about betrayal and our public, as if we were a brand. Then his lawyer sent a letter accusing me of tortious interference with advantageous relations, which Carter put in a file called Bluffs. Nevertheless, I lost sleep. I dreamed I was driving an ambulance with no brakes while a stadium of people applauded at the wrong times. Mom called after the court set a preliminary hearing on the cabins. "I'll come," she said, and I told her she didn't have to be brave for me anymore. She laughed, that small laugh people use when bravery never asked permission. Lena asked me whether I hated Dad. I said I couldn't afford to hate him. Hate runs expensive, and we had bills. The night before the hearing, I walked by the hotel and watched a maintenance worker unplug a light behind the waterfall. It went darker by one square, and the room seemed to breathe differently. My father's face on the lobby magazine had started to curl at the edges. I knew I should sleep, but I also knew that texts prefer midnight, and I was right. At 2:11 a.m., a new message arrived. "He's at the cage." We won the first hearing with words that felt like stitches. The judge voided the quitclaim on Mom's cabins pending full review and ordered an accounting of Sailwind transfers. "This doesn't make you safe," Carter warned. "It makes you visible." I started therapy with a woman named Rena who kept tissues on a low table and framed a diploma that said nothing about patience. "What did you learn at 8 that still drives you?" she asked. "That I only matter when someone is bleeding," I said, and we both looked at the uniform on the chair. We wrote a contract, personal, not legal, called Conditions for Help. If I help with logistics, it must be in writing. If Richard wants money, he must sell the hotel first and appear at therapy twice. If he speaks about my job with contempt, help pauses for 30 days. I emailed the conditions to Richard and CC Carter and Lena. "I accept in spirit," Richard replied, "but optics prevent public therapy." I didn't answer. Instead, I helped where it wouldn't feed the sickness. I introduced Dell to a nonprofit accountant who could monitor flows. I drove Mom to the county office to get certified copies. I sat with Lena while she called utilities to switch billing. We ate Aunt May's stews and learned that warmth can be a boundary too, given in exact portions. Rena asked me to list the version of forgiveness I could live with. "I can wish him well from a distance," I said. "I can keep him away from the matches." She nodded. "That's love grown cautious," she said. "Not less love, different." Richard texted me a photo of a meeting room with folding chairs and a sign that said Gamblers Anonymous, then followed it with a message, "This is for you." I replied, "Do it for the people you burned." He sent no answer. The hotel's waterfall was off for 3 days, then back on at half height. I went one evening to meet Dell about the monitoring plan and saw Sarah at the bar with a stroller, talking to a woman from housekeeping I recognized by her kind eyes. The baby reached for the light and laughed. I ordered a soda and let the quiet fill the space where anger used to sit, buzzing like a fluorescent bulb that nobody could fix. Rena asked softly, "What if helping means leaving?" And I finally answered, "I'm telling this so you can measure your oxygen before the smoke thickens. Dignity isn't a brand. It's a habit you practice when no one claps. Money moves fast and loud. Love moves slower and leaves receipts you don't file in ledgers. If your father, mother, partner, whoever holds the family narrative, begs you to save what they mocked, count the cost before you sprint. Ask for documents. Write dates. Photograph the signs behind the cash window and the seals on the advisory letterhead. Talk to the person who remembers birthdays and pantry shortages. They always know where the bodies aren't buried. And if you work a modest job that keeps people alive, refuse to let the wealthy rename it smaller so their mirrors can stay uncracked. Where we are now, Mom's cabins are safe for the season. Lena's mortgage payments go where they should. Sailwind is dissolving into its true name. Nothing. The casino cage has a new rule about caps and familiar watches. Richard attends meetings sometimes. Sometimes he sends me photos of ceilings with fluorescent tubes and motivational posters. We text without metaphors. When I do help, it's documented. When I don't, I sleep. Aunt May keeps a jar of victory marbles. One for every boundary held. One for every honest sentence. On nights I can't close my eyes, I count them like rosary beads and remember the maintenance worker unplugging the waterfall light. The room didn't go dark, it went truthful. If you're standing where I stood, here's the practical takeaway. Make a folder with names and dates. Put your conditions in writing. Invite a witness to every private conversation. Never sign an NDA that asks you to forget what you saw. And if your rescue becomes the fire's oxygen, step back until the flames lower to conversation height. Healing is boring until it isn't, until you realize boredom is safety in new clothes. The hopeful image I hold is the baby's hand reaching toward the watered light. It doesn't know about debts, liens, or optics, only that bright things can still be touched without breaking. Tonight, I'm letting that be enough, and tomorrow I'll put on my uniform again.